I covered oil and gas for 48 years.
Sure.
And most of it
So you
was
know this
conventional.
business well, yeah.
Not necessarily, but I'm familiar with the guys that walk around the oil patch. But when the Marcellus and the Utica came, we got caught up in that, and then, quite frankly, the industry outgrew me.
Sure.
The big companies came in, and
Sure.
it was just...
So let's talk about that, because there's some, it's not all big companies. There are smaller companies that have learned how to, leverage individual investors to grow their portfolio as well. So there's space here for some of the smaller players. I use, for example, Snyder Brothers down in Katanning, Laurel Mountain Energy, that was Vista Natural Gas. Those are smaller companies. Penn Energy Resources. Rich Weber was the head of Atlas, left that company, started a company on his own, got individual investment put together. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the large, the Exxon, the Chevron, Shells of the world that make this play what it is today. I would tell you that, we're going through what I would call a period of cautious optimism. We hit 111 active rigs in Pennsylvania in 2011. That was our high water mark in the shale development.
2011, how many rigs?
111 active rigs.
These are the huge rigs.
These are the large unconventional. When I talk about this industry, I'll speak of the unconventional. Okay. And the difference of unconventional isn't hydraulic fracturing. Everybody's trying. It's about being able to turn the drill bit horizontally.
Yeah, and we'll get into conventional, because that's still pretty lifeblood here.
Sure it is. Sure it is.
Period. Let me be a little bit the devil's advocate here.
Mm-hmm.
When the Shell plant started, I did an awful lot of stories on the ethylene.
Sure.
That one cut was going to hit the plastics industry and was going to help up here.
Sure.
How realistic is it that the cracker plant that far away, with all those little towns in the way?
It's actually in your backyard. I mean, folks think of, so what's Beaver County from here? 75 miles? Mm-hmm. It's virtually in your backyard. You've got a world-class supply of ethane, and ethane is the primary feedstock for plastics and chemical manufacturing. Mm-hmm. And I'll digress a bit here. You basically ionize or steam crack ethane into ethylene, and secondarily crack ethylene into polyethylene, forms what they call PE, or a polyethylene pellet. And it's used for high and low density plastics development. Low density is the stuff the sheet plastic that covers your clothes and you pick it up from the dry cleaners, linear plastics. The high density plastic are things like your milk jugs and the more tensile strength type of plastics that are available. So 70% of the U.S. plastic manufacturers are within 700 miles of our region. What I want to make sure is folks in this community don't think, well, they've got this facility being built, this is going to happen overnight. It won't. The facility itself is a 5 to 6 year construction project, $6 billion, and 6,000 workers in the process of constructing that plant. Long term, they'll have 600 permanent jobs, and I do believe that Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, Northern West Virginia will share in some of the potential downstream manufacturing opportunities that are created from this plan. I would also say we've gone from a period of tight supply and high price to a period of affordability and abundance of natural gas. Probably nowhere as evident as it is here. When I look at utility pricing across the state, the deepest discount for utility customers in the Commonwealth is in the national fuel system, 81% less than their purchased natural gas costs were in 2008.
Let me back up a little bit on that, because in 2000, I think it was 2008.
1371 price of natural gas.
Well, here the Henry Hub price was 17 million BTUs.
Yeah.
And Pengrade was, $138 a barrel for our paraffin oil.
Sure.
That surge then fell apart as soon as the development started and the supplies.
I think it's fair to say we were a bit of a victim of our own success. That we went from a period of tight supply, high price, to late 2009, early 2010, a period of, and it's probably more of, not a period, it's actually the norm, I would say now, a period of abundance and affordability. And most folks think of natural gas, they think of heating their home, cooking their food, drying their clothes, heating their hot water. But this is an opportunity for small towns. And I grew up in a small town, a lot like Oil City.
Clearfield?
I grew up in Du Bois.
Oh, Du Bois.
I grew up in Du Bois. Every town that I grew up around had at least a manufacturing facility of some sort. Oil City's no exception there. They're driven by, affordable labor costs and energy. It's no surprise that we started witnessing significant decline, in the steel industry 3 or 4 decades ago. But now with the affordability of natural gas, and you think about steel, glass, plastics, chemicals, fertilizers, powdered metals, pharmaceutical medications, and today 1 in 3 electrons being generated with natural gas. We have an enormous opportunity to regenerate commercial and industrial applications back in our towns and communities across Pennsylvania. We've got an extraordinary, talented labor force in the Commonwealth. They're used to hard work. We have to find the opportunity to keep our kids at home, and I think this is it. I think affordable energy is it. Again, to give you an idea where we've gone, conventionally, our shallow production activity in Pennsylvania, at our peak in 2008, we produced 180 billion cubic feet. That's about a quarter of Pennsylvania's supply.
Right.
Last year we hit 5.37 trillion cubic feet. We'll probably top 5.8 trillion this year. That's close to a quarter.
But it doesn't, but David, it doesn't seem to be applicable to small towns like this. And I'm talking about Titusville, Warren, Bradford, it's fine that we have affordable energy and that we have a cracker plant that may send some new streams of revenue up here. Tell me those, because you're from a small town, tell me specifically, how will it affect right here, like 3 years down the road?
I think the immediate effect is the price of energy to your consumers. You have a 41% decline in the wholesale price of electric power. That's as a result of natural gas being used in power generation.
Right.
As well, our air's cleaner. Folks don't read about that. They see where we are with Paris and the debate going on in Washington. As a result of natural gas being used in power generation today, we're going to hit the targets of Paris. We're already at a 25-year low in carbon. You never hear that, but we're at a 25-year low in carbon dioxide emissions. We've reduced dramatically nitrogen oxide emissions, particulate emissions, and sulfur dioxide emissions. Again, huge targets from a climate perspective. Benefit to hometown USA. Our air is much cleaner. So more affordable energy, much cleaner air, and I think we have the ability with affordable energy to regenerate manufacturing. I mean, are we going to see huge industrial plants rerouted in our communities? Probably not, but small industrial applications. I mean, we have entrepreneurs all through our communities, and it's great now that we've got affordable energy. It could be the catalyst for some of that.
Are you talking, we're talking about the deep gas, Marcellus, we're talking, you haven't mentioned Utica, but I would assume that's.
Utica's the same, and you have additional, you have different parts of the state, you have different shales that are being explored as well. In this area and up to the north, there's no secret that the center part of Pennsylvania and the northwestern part of Pennsylvania aren't in the target zones for deep shale development yet. And it's probably driven as much by price and availability of the Marcellus and the Utica play. You've got a little bit of development over at Clarion. I don't know if there's any, there may be one active rig right now in Clearfield, but there's 37 active rigs in Pennsylvania today. Marcellus and Utica.
Oh, Utica too?
Utica too, absolutely. Potter County today is primarily a Utica shoot, which is Terry Pagula's company, JKLM Energy. Seneca, and the Seneca, which is a subsidiary of National Fuel, very active in Elk and Cameron and McKean counties, and they're doing both Marcellus and Utica development. I believe Geneseo development, another hydrocarbon-bearing Devonian shale that they're drilling into to find vast amounts of natural gas.
Well, they always say that because of the conventional wells, the shallow, the marginal wells,
Mhm.
that is actually seepage from the Utica. Geologists have said, like, well, you know what, if it's there, it's deeper. Is that,
I'm not a geologist by trade. I would tell you that the Marcellus is a very tight formation. It's also 8,000 feet deep. So, I mean, you have some wells in the area that are 5,000 or 6,000 feet deep, but most of our shallow wells were further up in the strata chain than that.
well, they're talking about redrilling them now.
Understood.
Is that,
It's certainly a possibility.
let me talk about the conventional a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
these were huge success stories in here by
Sure they
small
were.
mom and pop things.
Sure.
You know,
We drill 4,000 of them a year.
Mhm. Particularly Tri-County area, Banana Clearing Forest.
Sure.
And at $138 a barrel, we were seeing people going out buying new trucks,
Sure you were.
repainting their house, not
Sure you were.
huge things, but big deal. Is there any future left for the stripper wells, the stripper oil and gas wells?
I think the issue there is to be able to get adequate pipeline capacity to take those volumes away. It's pretty clear that someone's interested in them because there are companies that are buying large numbers of stripper wells. Companies like Diversified have bought some of Seneca's wells, I believe some of XTO's wells, EQT's wells. So that a lot of the bigger companies that are focused on the unconventional asset have shed their conventional asset business. The big issue today is to get capacity on the interstate pipeline system, pipelines that are full in our area because we need to modernize those facilities. They're full and trying to have capacity to get into those lines to deliver gas to consumers. I would tell you that some in this area probably already have capacity and arrangements to move gas into utility systems. When you see that number that I gave you of an 81% decline in NFG's purchased natural gas costs, it's because they have almost 100% of their load today, or what they put into the system is locally produced, whether it's conventional gas or, for the most part, I believe shale gas that they're developing in their system. I think that's been a huge benefit to customers, and I think that continues. So the question you asked me, what's the future for the conventional business? I've been in this business a long time. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would tell you, I think the key point is to be able to get gas into the interstate pipeline system and to have that. And I think that's why companies are developing, that are buying conventional assets. They're trying to amass large quantity of them so they can get the volume requirements necessary to enter the interstate pipeline systems. So do I think it's dead? No. Do I think there'll be a lot of conventional wells drilled in the future? I don't. I think you'll see conventional operators come together, seek other forms of capital investment in their company to drill unconventional type of wells, because the deliverability of gas is so much greater off of a single well location. And both industries, the conventional industry and the unconventional industry, I think are the most regulated businesses now in the Commonwealth. We drilled 812 wells last year, unconventional wells in Pennsylvania, almost 17,000 inspections. I mean, and the conventional industry had over 16,000 inspections. So this industry is under a very tight microscope, and rightly so. I would share with you, when we put the coalition together, and I was part of that, we wanted to make sure we had a robust framework for development so we didn't strand capital investment in this play. If it's not done correctly, it's not going to be done very long. So we knew we had to do it right. I think we've learned a lot. 2008, 2009, even early 2010, it may have taken us 60 days to drill an unconventional well with a 2,000-foot lateral. Today, we're drilling wells in 20 days with 10,000-foot laterals, and the production is so much greater than any of us ever thought. I mean, we did a study with Penn State called an emerging giant back in the beginning of this play. They felt that Pennsylvania could be a net exporter by 2014. We blew that away in 2010.
But with your drilling increasing and your production increasing, was it because the regulations went lax, or because
No.
the industry said, no, we gotta follow them?
We had a robust framework for development in Pennsylvania. This shale play is so much better than anybody ever thought. this is a world-class shale play where we've gone from producing a quarter of Pennsylvania's gas to a quarter of America's natural gas, and we're number 2 in the country for gas production today, behind the Permian in Texas. Which is...
And behind the Bakken?
We're way ahead of the Bakken in terms of gas production. We don't produce oil. I will tell you, Bakken is an incredible play because it's an oil play. It's a heavier play. We have light NGLs west of Interstate 79, kind of northern West Virginia, eastern Ohio, that western postage stamp of the corner of PA. It's ethane, pentane, butane, isobutane, propane, and natural gasolines. No oils. We really produce no oil here.
What about, speaking of oil though, because Pengrade is classified.
And we're in the home of oil. Yeah,
You're
yeah.
the birthplace of the
That's
industry.
right, we are.
But we're Pengrade and we're paraffin, so we're,
Yep.
we're lubes.
Yep.
Not gasoline, we're not other, we're some
Understood.
little bit of white kerosene, but that's
Sure.
it. It was, that industry has always argued that's a niche. That's special. That's why Quaker State, Pennzoil, and Wolfset made their lubes out of
Sure.
Pengrade. Is that unique enough to hold its own, or like you said, will it be massed into conglomerates sort of to go after the bigger? Is it unique enough?
I don't know if I'm expert enough to make them, because that would be a tall statement for me to say no. I'm not in a position, I don't think, to say that, because I don't know that oil business well enough. I've been, my whole life, 37 years, has been in the natural gas business. So on the pipeline side, utility side, and about 9 years on the production side. So do I know the oil business well enough to know that the light crude business is on shallow ground here? I don't know that, so I don't want to make that kind of a statement. I do know that NGLs being produced in the southwestern part of Pennsylvania end up becoming supplementary to our petroleum-based products, to be able to take those to refining facilities and to refine those and be supplemental to our oil supply in Pennsylvania. I think that's a really good thing. The fact that we're now less than 20% dependent on foreign sources of oil and dependent on America and Canada for providing our oil supply, I think is a really good thing. We went from 2008, we were over 60% dependent on foreign oil to less than 20% today. What a celebration to be able to say that we're no longer at the grasp of folks that don't like us very much to provide our oil supply. And folks will say, well, we'll do it with renewables. We're not going to be a mobile community with wind and solar power. We produce 1.6% of our power with wind and less than 0.5% with solar. We may increase those dramatically over time, but there's no better fuel for using renewables than natural gas, because it comes on quickly and can be taken off quickly, and it's a baseload fuel. It's not interruptible. You can bring it on when you need it and be supplemental to our renewables when that happens. So I'm not here to beat up on renewables. Please don't take that position, but I will tell you, I think we've got a world-class supply of natural gas that'll drive our future for generations to come. I think that we're just getting started in this shale play, and it's not just the Marcellus. If there's a mistake we made with the coalition that I represent, it's the fact that we limited it to just the Marcellus.
Is there such a thing as
Today is because it's deeper and it's more expensive to get to. The Trent is even deeper than that. So when gas prices improve at some point, there'll likely be development there again as well. So there are other hydrocarbon bearing shales that operators will look at in this region too. I mean, it hasn't happened yet. If I take a look at what's happened in the state, early part of this play, when gas prices are high, you had rig counts scattered across the Marcellus region, about 33 of our 67 counties. Today, that rig count is isolated primarily in the southwestern corner and in the northeastern corner. Why? Price is the primary driver there. We have deep discounts to NYMEX pricing. So when you read on the ticker coming across the TV that's gas selling at $3, it's not Pennsylvania. We sold gas last October at 70 cents in Pennsylvania. Right now, I just looked this morning before I came here, we're averaging about $2.30, and that's way up from where we were a couple of months ago because we got power gen load driving price a little bit.
you're talking about gasoline?
I'm talking about natural gas.
Oh, natural gas.
Natural gas pricing,
It's-
yeah. Natural gas pricing in NYMEX has been $2.85 to $3.
Right.
It's close to gasoline, yeah, but please don't confuse the two.
No, but it's been, I was looking at it, it hasn't done about 4. for like the
Absolutely
last-
right, but it's actually been hovering around $2.80 to $3 for the last year. I think last year average price for 2017 was $2.88 average for the year. Our discounts in Pennsylvania are enormous because we don't have what we call takeaway capacity. Folks don't realize it, but we have no Pennsylvania natural gas that goes into Philadelphia. Zero, or very little. If we do, it's transported off of different systems. But historically, gas came into DC, Baltimore, Philly, New Jersey, and into New York out of the Gulf Coast states. We've got a world-class supply of gas 100 miles away in the northern Marcellus, and we're trying to get pipeline into Philadelphia.
But if the price is so low though, that I would think that would fail to be a stimulant to re-energize the drilling here.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, so in your crystal ball, can you look at this, when, in 5 years, are we gonna start pushing this again? Do you?
Here's what I think about that. I think the reason why I started my comments, why there's a cautious optimism, is we're beginning to modernize our infrastructure. So when I said gas was selling average in Pennsylvania at $2.30, up in the Northeast where we've got this world-class supply of dry natural gas, Susquehanna, Bradford, Lycoming, Wyoming counties, over north of Williamsport, that is a world-class supply of dry natural gas. It's the deepest discounted basin, part of this play in the country. This month selling at $2.16. So if gas is $2.85, you have a 70-cent haircut in the Northeast for the commodity you as a producer produce. So right out of the gate, you're taking 70 cents less than many of the folks when they see a Henry Hub price or a NYMEX price of gas, 70 cents. Leidy, north of State College, was at $2.30 or $2.28, I think, today. And the western part of Pennsylvania is at $2.40. So we've seen a bit of a movement of rig count to the southwestern corner. Greene County has got a third of the rigs today. They have a third of the rig count. Pennsylvania's in Greene County. Liquids rich, good pipeline takeaway capacity, and there's a differentiation in price. I mentioned $2.16 in the north, $2.40 at Dominion South. If you go east of Murraysville on Route 22, just by the Lamplighter Restaurant, just past it, there's a big facility on the left. It's called Oakford Station. There are 4 or 5 major interstate pipelines come in there, and they store about 130 billion cubic feet of natural gas there. That's a hub point or a trading point for natural gas.
But I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No.
What you're telling me then is because we have inexpensive, not cheap, but inexpensive natural gas here, we will be the market that industry goes to. It won't be the Texas natural gas. It won't be the LNGs off the coast. It'll be, Pennsylvania will be the stream. Is that what you're saying?
I think it'll be a little bit of both. I think we've got the most affordable, some of the most affordable energy on the planet here. But there are markets in mid-Atlantic, in the East Coast, even to the Northwest. We've got gas historically came into Pennsylvania from the southwestern corner, moved up through the center part of Pennsylvania into the New York market. Today, pipelines are being built to move gas into Chicago, up into Canada, from the northern Pennsylvania down into the East Coast market to get gas to Cove
So
Point.
our market is greater because we're less expensive.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And we're producing 5.4 trillion when we only use 1.3 of it in our, we peak out at about, at the coldest days of the winter, we peak out at about 12 billion a day that we use, and we're producing 17 even in the summer, so.
So due to prolific production and low prices, we're the natural gas of choice.
We're
pretty much.
a supply basin for natural gas, not only for the US now, I would tell you that I think we have an international market emerging as well. And why is that important? And I want to differentiate here, because some people say, oh my God, we're going to ship it all out of the country. No, we're not. We don't have the capability to ship it all out of the country. Cove Point peaks out at about 1 billion a day. We're producing between 16 and 17 billion a day. At our maximum, we use 12 billion a day.
Cubic feet you're talking.
Yeah, billion cubic feet of natural gas. So if we're producing 17, at our max coldest days of the winter, we burn about 12. We have a glut or an excess supply of natural gas. Sending at max output, Cove Point will burn about 1 billion a day. Think about the fact that a winter ago, Vladimir Putin told the people of Ukraine, I'm going to shut your gas supply off. if we have the ability to float LNG into those communities, it changes our position in the world economy and globally. Our geopolitical hand strengthens dramatically by us being able to play in an LNG market.
Okay, let me throw this at you, because this is on the negative side.
Okay.
We have an impact tax.
Yeah, let's have that conversation.
Well, we're gonna,
That's
but
good.
I know you could go all day on that, so we're gonna.
Let's- I'm not on the Christmas
Thank
card
you.
list, let's put it that way.
No, when this all started with the severance tax, Pennsylvania was only one of 2 states in the country that didn't have one.
Correct.
Now, there's talk now saying, well, the severance tax wouldn't make much difference because you're not producing that much. Well, obviously you are. And the impact tax hits our back roads, doesn't really hit anything.
Here, let me share this with you. The impact tax was put together in 2012 to share monies locally with communities, primarily where development's taken place. It's not really to cover roads. Our industry, when we come in, the unconventional business is required before we come in. We use a lot of trucks on the road, so we have to prepare Pennsylvania's roads for our use before we travel them, and we have to repair them when we're done. So most of the areas where shale's taken place, these were roads that were dirt at one point. They threw oil chip down. There was no full base put down. So I've worked for companies that I watched the billions of dollars have been invested in Pennsylvania to upgrade our road infrastructure. And everywhere shale's taken place, roads are better today than they were before. The impact fee was part of a 3-tiered program. First of all was to heighten regulation. We wanted to modernize the regulatory framework for development. You may not know this, but a well in 2008, a well permit was $100. We agreed to increase the permit on a per foot drilled base that actually moved the price to about $3,600, and now it's $5,000 a well permit. It was to try and give DEP staffing. So you may hear DEP doesn't have adequate staff to review our industry. They went from 60 compliance inspection staff to over 225. That complement today is 190. With 111 rigs versus 37 rigs today, they're probably where they need to be from a number standpoint. But DEP now has a proposal to increase that permit fee from $5,000 a permit to $12,500 a permit. We've been careful in this tax fight to not just say no or hell no to the fee proposal for the new permit fee. But we want to know what that includes. What's in that for the industry? Is there a longer permit time for a well permit? Was there greater predictability on a turnaround of a permit? You have a pretty good region out of Meadville, the northwest region, but southwest does not perform very well. Last year, an earth disturbance permit in the southwest region took 262 days to deliver. A well permit took 113. You go to Texas and it's like a Sonic. They come out roller skates to give you your permit.
That's Texas.
Yeah, understood. And I understand we're not Texas and we're not asking for Texas.
You said 3-tiered though, okay, one
Yeah, first was
modernize the
environment.
regulatory framework.
The second was local zoning uniformity. Folks asked the question, why in the world would the industry ask for zoning uniformity? What people didn't realize is that 60% of Pennsylvania doesn't have formal zoning. We have 2,600 communities across Pennsylvania. Not every community has the technical expertise to provide oversight over gas drilling. So we wanted uniformity. That was thrown out by the courts back in 2013, the Robinson Township case.
Oh.
And the fee has remained. It's produced $1.43 billion. I find it pretty callous that the governor says there's no tax in place, and
The tax for,
part of Act 13 was heightened regulation,
Right.
local zoning uniformity, and the impact fee.
oh, okay.
And that impact fee is now generated in 6 years, $1.43 billion. I look at, there are surrounding states that have a tax, West Virginia, Ohio, I'll add Colorado and Arkansas, and our impact tax has out-generated those 4 combined.
It still
Col-
doesn't exceed the severance tax though.
Severance tax collections in Colorado, Arkansas, Ohio, and West Virginia don't equal what we raised in our impact fee in Pennsylvania.
Just to be a little bit argumentative though, if you were producing, if you were getting those Marcellus wells clicked back on, the severance tax would be huge. Am I correct in that assessment?
It all depends.
I mean, the potential to have a lot of money is there.
I mean, the potential's there, but I would tell you we're already generating a huge amount of money. And that's making the leap that if we add a huge tax on Pennsylvania, and by the way, the governor's proposal puts one tax on top of the other. If you render Pennsylvania uncompetitive with other shale plays, it takes the statement of the governor that the gas is here, they have nowhere else to go. That provides validity to that. I would tell you, ask the employees of Noble Energy, WPX Energy, Shell Appalachia, Burnett Oil Company, Atlas Energy. Those companies are gone from Pennsylvania. They're no longer here.
Well, but David, but the Marcellus is still here.
Sure it
It's
is.
not going anywhere.
But it doesn't produce any revenue if no one's drilling into it.
Okay, but if the options to drill here in something that is high quality and prolific as opposed to going to a heavy place like the Texas or the Bakken.
Or like Ohio, that's just
Well,
as
Ohio-
easy,
but Ohio-
maybe a lot easier than we are here in Pennsylvania or
Even with
northern
the
West Virginia.
injection wells?
That's injection wells are water, that's a water issue. That's not a gas production issue. I mean, today in Pennsylvania, we're recycling almost every drop of water that's produced.
Well, I was just thinking about curbing drilling in Ohio. I mean, they stopped that for a while because they said you gotta figure out how to do these disposal wells
They
better.
did, yes. Disposal wells and drilling are two different things.
Right.
They stopped the disposal well development in eastern Ohio for a period of time. They have not stopped gas drilling. They have 25 active rigs in Ohio. And they're very competitive with our operations. We've lost operators in Pennsylvania to Ohio.
Okay, but your argument though is that if you over-regulate this or make it onerous, they will leave. Or maybe not leave.
If
They
you
will
make
not
it,
drill.
if you damage the financial competitiveness of this play, capital will go to the path of least resort, and has. There are 480 active rigs in the Permian today. We're the second largest gas play in the country, and we have 37. I would tell you policies matter, and it's already impacting Pennsylvania's investment climate. We are a difficult place to invest.
Is that because of lack of consistency or just because of always this
Predictability,
threat?
certainty, all of that. I mean, we've never stopped throwing new regulation on top of an industry. This is an industry that needs an opportunity. We've modernized our regulatory framework for development. It needs to allow that industry to settle in to a consistent path for investment and let them produce natural gas. We want a robust framework for development. I think we've got maybe the most robust framework for development in the country today in Pennsylvania.
The Stronger study indicates that.
I'm sorry, but
There's a study called the Stronger study that indicates that we're probably one of the most stringent regulatory environments.
I should remember what Stronger stands for, but if you look up state regulatory, it's
I can send it to
it's
you.
a group of academics, industry folks, regulators that all came together to look, that are across the country, that look at the rules in various shale plays. They basically say Pennsylvania has some of the most robust rules in the country here in Mercantile.
well, it's interesting because this is a valley that invented the industry.
Sure,
But
it
the
is.
very industry was
It's here,
here.
sure. But let's be clear though. We're not in a position like we were in the 30s, 40s, or 50s, whether it be coal, gas, oil, whatever. This is a much, much different regulatory framework for people to invest. There are folks that make the statement, well, we're not going to allow, what happened in our coal industry to happen here with our gas industry. I promise you that nearly everyone around our board table are Pennsylvanians. They're not Texans. We like to hike and bike and hunt and fish and camp and do all the things that Pennsylvanians do. We want to make sure this gets done correctly, and we've worked hard to modernize the framework for development to make sure it does. And I would tell you, today, every well location is being built to house 6, 8, 10, maybe even 12 wells on location. That's a lot different than our framework before. Those pad locations are a little larger, but it's one road, it's one pipeline, 12 roads with a well site in many cases that can fuel as many as 175,000 homes off of a single well site. That's a far cry different from what we had just a decade ago in Pennsylvania.
Oh, yes.
A far cry different. It's why we are now the number 2 shale play in the country.
Feel free, Luca. I love talking about oil and gas, and so I'm sort of like
As you can
David,
tell, I
we're
do
just
too.
talking.
Yeah.
It's really funny in the sense that, like, you're asking so many of the same questions that were on my mind anyway, okay? But I just asked you maybe to elaborate on one question that I
Sure.
had, that we just talked about as far as the difference between the impact fee and the severance tax,
There's,
okay?
the only difference in the impact fee and the severance tax is what we called it. Under Governor Corbett, he took a no tax pledge. Remember the Grover Norquist test and all that stuff? Our industry, we were at the table. We sat down with the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors and folks in state government to try and provide a source of revenue. I would tell you, I think the impact fee has worked marvelously for rural communities. And why? Because it lost a path to find funding. Doesn't sound like much, but $1 million have come into Venango County with not a lot of development here. Doesn't sound like a lot, but I would tell you if that money went into the general fund in Harrisburg, do you think you would have got $1 million out of the oil and gas fund? Probably
Yeah, but
not.
David, I did those stories, and there were places here, Canal Township, doesn't have that many rigs, but has some, got 18 cents. Cranberry Township in Venango County, I think it was like $4,200.
Understood,
And-
understood.
And so they look at that and go,
Understood.
well, wait a minute, we've got the tankers, with ergon trucks are still running around, and why is it just this amount? Whereas those people say the severance tax is, it doesn't hurt you until you start making money, and you sever it.
It's not
It's-
how it
that's a
works.
simplistic-
The minute you produce gas and a severance tax, you're paying a fee.
Right.
It's like pulling gas out of a gas hose. And I would tell you, the difference today is we have a governor that wants to pancake one tax on top of another when we got the highest corporate net income tax in the country in Pennsylvania. Folks don't look at the full cadre of taxes that we've got in Pennsylvania. First of all, we've got the highest motor fuel tax in the country, basically to repair our roads and bridges, and I think that's fantastic. We've got the highest corporate net income tax rate in the country. We're nose to nose with Illinois. Illinois, the way they apply it, it may be a tad higher. We're 9.99% corporate net. Now we've got an impact tax, depending on what the sales price of natural gas. Last year when gas was selling at 70 cents, it was a 9% effective rate. There's times when it's been as low as 2. So an average severance tax collection across the country is about 5. But if you take a look at a state like Texas, everyone uses Texas as the example. Texas has no corporate net. On top of that, they give you a period that doesn't pay, you don't have to pay the severance tax till the well's profitable. Louisiana has a 3-year implementation process where you pay 1.5% year 1, 2.5% year 2, 3.5% year 3. We've got a fee that hits a minute the drill bit hits the ground, and this is something I didn't talk about. We've drilled about 10,300 wells in Pennsylvania.
Wait, oil and gas, oil?
Natural gas wells.
Deep one?
Deep horizontal wells, about 10,300 to date since 2008. 8,200 of those are in production. All of them are subject to the impact fee.
8,200.
So 20% of our wells, of unconventional wells, aren't in production. That if you are in a severance tax environment, would be paying 0. All of them are paying impact fee. All of them. Because the way the statute was written, the day the drill bit touches the ground, it's called spud date, you pay the fee.
Well, let me ask you this, citing that, along with citing, you also talked about how with the impact tax in Pennsylvania, this state is bringing in more money than the 6 other states that you talked about, okay?
4, I mentioned 4.
Okay.
I've mentioned Colorado, Arkansas, West Virginia, and Ohio.
Ohio, okay.
And we're outpacing all 4 of them combined.
Okay, why would you think that the argument for an impact fee as opposed to the severance tax? I mean, in other words, maintain the impact fee as opposed to switching to the severance tax or putting the severance tax on top of the impact fee. Why is that argument that seemingly seems to be falling on deaf ears, politically speaking? Why would you say, I mean, is it just
I would
plain
tell you,
politics involved?
this has been a 6-year battle since the impact fee passed. I was the one that actually was in the room that helped negotiate this. If you read Act 13, which was House Bill 1950, it states in there that the day that a severance tax is passed, the impact fee goes away. So there are communities, and a lot of communities where shale's taking place, that are pushing back because they know if this money goes into the general fund and is taken away, that they'll never see money coming back into those rural communities again. However, that said, the legislature has made comment that they're gonna keep the impact fee no matter what. So they end up going changing the statute, and then you pancake a tax on top of a tax. And that's my argument, that I think you render this industry in an uncompetitive position with other shale plays by adding a tax on top of a tax. You never hear the governor comment, we're gonna give you full credit for your impact fee collections. He actually won't even go as far as to say we pay a tax. I mean, when companies are writing $20 million checks a year in their impact fee collections, how offensive is it to say you're not paying a tax?
Okay, so the legislature would still keep the impact fee tax if conceivably the severance tax came into play.
That's the way they're approaching it,
Okay,
yes.
but like, okay, just clarify this for my own edification. How does the Wolf administration see that? Would they also want to tax on top of tax?
That's their approach.
That's their
The
approach?
proposals that you've seen primarily are the administration's proposals. You've had
But the
a
legislature would go along with the Wolf administration's proposal?
I would tell you that the proposals that have been debated on the floor of the House, think of, even if you're a Republican and you're Republican legislator and you want a severance tax, primarily out of Philadelphia, they would want to make sure their proposal would pass muster with the governor to sign the bill if they're lucky enough to get it passed. So they've gone to proposals that are very similar to the governor's proposal, which pancakes one tax on top of the other.
Okay.
Yep.
You know, let me ask you this, and I know you need to be going.
No, I don't.
You need to spend the whole day.
I'm good. I'm
Yeah,
good.
we're good.
I haven't been with you guys for a while. I'm fine with this. This is a good conversation.
But McDonald, what is
Pat
he?
McDonald, the
Yeah.
DEP secretary.
Yes.
Yes.
He was in, and we talked about this for a little bit. And one of the, and even though the aside, I still have an awful lot of friends that still go out every day.
By the way, when I took a shot at the turnaround times for DEP, I would tell you that I think Pat McDonald is working to try and, I think he's making a conscious effort to try and fix some of those problems, so.
Well, but one of the arguments was the conventional, even though it probably is a dying breed by now. But one of their arguments is that one size fits all. That once the Marcellus boys came in, all of a sudden, the footprint of that well changed. The brine regulations changed, the concrete pad changed, and they took that one size fits all and said, you little person over here, stripper well that make 10 gallons a day, you have to follow the same rules. Is your coalition concerned with that at all, or have you really moved beyond that?
I would tell you that the conventional industry had a piece of legislation they pushed last year to try and codify some of those earlier development type of activities. I would tell you that our focus is to make sure gas production, whether it's conventional, unconventional, or other, is being done environmentally correctly. So we've not lobbied against that piece of legislation, but it's not our bill. We're trying to make sure we've got a robust framework of development, high environmental standard for shale wells unconventionally produced in Pennsylvania. Because we know if they're not done correctly, we won't do it for very long. So again, I mentioned that we want to make sure it's done right. We've worked as a coalition steadfastly to try and make sure we've got good rules in place in Pennsylvania, and we've been successful there. Has there been some spillover effect? I would tell you there's so much more scrutiny on Pennsylvania's natural gas industry today. It's from, when you think about New York, Delaware, Maryland, shut down development, there's no natural gas development there. There's a lot of anti-fossil fuel money that's found its way into Pennsylvania. Not hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars to push back on fossil fuel development. I don't know how they think we're gonna to fuel this animal, but there are people out there that believe that you can run our industries and our businesses and have the kind of flexibility we've got in transportation by doing it with something other than fossil fuels. I just think it's a fallacy.
You won't find very many of those people here.
Understood.
I mean, they
But I think
understand that.
that folks here ought to be aware of the fact that there are millions of dollars flowing into Pennsylvania to try and promote policies to stop fossil fuel development. For the most part, they've been successful in coal. We've got 17 natural gas power plants being built across Pennsylvania today. Gas is probably the primary benefactor of the decline in coal.
But
And
it's cheaper though, but it also.
It is today, it's
cheaper.
money, but it's also air compliance.
Yes,
It's, the scrub plants, the cleaner plants remain. The older plants that hadn't had the investment on scrubbing technology are the ones that have been decommissioned or shut down. And
What-
gas is replacing those.
but what about, it seems to me that in the general public, and maybe this is naive, but most of the argument about the deep drilling has to do with fracking and the chemicals that are used and the disruption to water tables and so on. They don't seem to mind the transmission lines or the roads going in or the actual drilling,
Right.
but the fracking part of it, and that's it's a corporate secret as to what that formula is. Well,
In Act 13, we've agreed, and part of that environmental framework that I talked about on one of those 3 legs was full disclosure of chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing on Frac Focus. Public website, our operators in Pennsylvania are required to fully disclose the chemicals used in
Oh, I
those
missed
wells.
that. I
They
did
are.
miss that.
I didn't mention it to you, I should have. But chemical disclosure was part of Act 13 in Pennsylvania. All chemicals used in hydraulic fracturing operations have to be disclosed on a website called fracfocus.org.
But what about the criticism of that? I mean, you go down to some of the mid.
We drilled the Trenton way deeper than the Marcellus, and we fracked it too. We've been fracking wells in
No,
Pennsylvania since 43.
1859. No, since 1859.
Yeah.
You know, they were throwing nitro torpedoes right
Yes,
down
correct,
those wells.
correct. Different type of fracking, but you're absolutely right.
They've been doing it
You're
the whole
absolutely
time.
right.
But and I don't remember the name of the town where all of the water system was ruined.
Dimmick.
Dimmick, that's
And,
right. I was gonna say
and what
Dimmick.
they found out, I'd ask you to do a little research on that. The DEP has fully investigated Dimmick. You will find nearly all of the areas in Dimmick had free methane in their water long before gas development ever took place
Well,
there.
it was some of the coal seams.
Shallow methane in coal seams.
Right.
I mean, the town of Burning Well, the town of Marcellus, you have places where shallow methane buildup has created small fires long before gas development ever took place, because we've got places, I mean, this town was founded on an oil seep. We knew where to drill for oil because it was outcropping in this town. It happens, that's part of our geology.
But what you would say though, in your coalition, that the fracking, no, we have adhered to the regulations
That's
that we
correct.
helped develop.
That's correct.
And so therefore it's safer, would you say that?
I
mean,
would,
it's-
absolutely would. Yep, I would tell you that the environmental rules for oversight, I mean, a lot of folks were concerned about the volume of water being used early on. I will tell you that we have worked directly with the river basin commissions on withdrawals of water to make sure there's no impact to the water table of water taken for hydraulic fracturing. And you need to look at the reports of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. They've actually studied extensively now with nearly 10 years of development what water withdrawals have meant to that water table.
So the chemical disclosure of your drilling fluids and the sands, in the water, the volume of water used, plus the Water Quality Acts and all that.
Correct.
Those are things that have led to, and I don't mean to use your words, but that have made fracking not as dangerous as it appears to people.
I would
Are
tell
you
you,
thinking-
any industrial process, if you have the rules in place, can be done properly. And that's exactly what's happened in fracking historically has been done correctly. It's been villainized in an effort to stop, I mean, engineers named a lot of our technologies that now are being used against us. Hydraulic fracturing which doesn't have a K in it, by the way, that opponents of shale gas development now call it, they're gonna frack this and it has a K on it. I would tell you probably for a reason.
Well, and
that-
hydraulic simply means water.
That's correct. Yeah,
It's-
absolutely. But if you think about I'll digress, chemicals used in the development of a well. First of all, we're taking fresh water out of a river system. There's bacteria in that water. So we'll use a bacterial agent to kill the bacteria. The primary chemical that we're accused of polluting with is a muriatic acid. People clean their sidewalks, they'll use a light muriatic acid to clean their concrete. Think about the fact when we case a well, we punch cement down, much like a plunger, down inside a pipe, and forces the cement back up the outside of called the annulus of a well. We clean that cement with a muriatic acid. Basically, if you go back to 8th grade chemistry, you take an acid and you mix it with a base like lime, which is the primary ingredient in cement, it comes out neutralized. And that's what few people even realize, that the primary ingredient we use is to kill bacteria, to clean the pipe in the development of that well location. And it's about 0.5% of what goes down that well. So,
And one other question too, is we had a Pennsylvania brine plant here, it was along the river, and always met the
Franklin
clean
brine.
water. Yeah,
Yes.
Franklin brine, Sparky DeLong had it, it was always very good. There was an issue all of a sudden though, that the bromide, which was a natural component of the wastewater, was fine when it hit the river. And then it was having an effect when it went past chlorination plants.
I would tell you, because I was part of that decision as well. Early development of shale, a lot of water was being taken to public treatment facilities. The brine or the salt concentrations on the deep unconventional wells with longer laterals was a much more concentrated brine. We as a coalition went to the DEP and said we shouldn't be taking unconventional waters to public treatment facilities in Pennsylvania. They ended up putting a regulation in place, but the industry self-policed itself. And we developed processes with major water management companies to basically take water, treat that water, knock out the solids and any metals that are in the water. You dig in the Earth's crust, there's going to be metals. You take the metals out and basically take a clean brine back to the next hydraulic fracturing operation and blend that water with fresh water. We use some AMD water as well. Acid mine drainage water in Pennsylvania is a problem. There are companies that are now trying to use AMD water to lessen Pennsylvania's problem and use that in hydraulic fracturing operations as well. So I would tell you, for the most part today, water in the Commonwealth is being recycled at nearly every location where gas is being produced. It's a wonderful success story because it lessens our need for fresh water and eliminates disposal. And again, I'm speaking of the unconventional industry, not the conventional industry. I know part of that, I think it's House Bill 107, that the conventional legislation, they're trying to codify the use of brine treatment facilities like they have in Franklin. So, I will tell you, that's a little concerning, and we're not opposed, but I would tell you that our industry gets lumped together. And folks say they're taking water to public treatment facilities. The unconventional industry in Pennsylvania in May of 2011 agreed not to take one drop of produced water that comes back out of the wellbore to a public treatment
Well,
facility.
the unconventional doesn't either. They don't take it to a municipal system, they take it to a brine disposal.
Understood. I'm trying to say that the unconventional industry no longer, since May of 2011, takes water to public treatment facilities, okay? There's a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot there, but and I'm sorry to press you so hard for conventional, or the unconventional, because the stripper well, I mean, that's always been our thing.
Sure it is.
And
And that's
unfortunately-
our history in Pennsylvania, and our history's been a good one. We've always supplemented our gas supply. I would tell you, the savings to consumers now because of shale gas development doesn't just happen though in western Pennsylvania. And again, I grew up in Dubois, I had a lot of shale wells. We were the primary benefactors of shale production because companies blended it into their interstate hauls of natural gas and it lessened the price. Today, consumers across Pennsylvania have seen anywhere from a 57 to an 81% decline. And I mentioned earlier on, National Fuel's discount over 2008 prices is 81%. And that's purchased natural gas price.
One last question,
Yeah.
because I'm gonna push you on this.
Please.
Because all right, it's only a few miles away, it's not undoable.
Sure.
But there are hundreds of communities between that cracker plant and where we sit.
Mhm.
How in the world does it help here? I still, the cheaper fuel and on and on and on, but practically speaking, what does it mean for us?
I'll tell you, when you manufacture products, first of all, when I looked at the study that's been done, the only cracking facility in the US today, cracking facilities are down in the Gulf Coast states. They transport products up here to be able to manufacture plastic goods. That savings immediately, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's significant, is it's 1.2% on the cost of goods sold saved just on transportation of those raw materials to develop plastics. Doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're developing plastic products, it's significant. We have a number of those existing plants here, and do we have entrepreneurs that want to try and get into some form of plastics manufacturing here, whether it be water bottles or paints or coatings or sealants, tires? I mean, I don't know if I have any of these in the, if not, I'll certainly send you one. I have a wheel, I think I don't have it in this presentation, but there's a wheel that shows all the different products that are manufactured from ethane. Erica, if you could send that up to them, I would appreciate that. It's not hard to fathom that one of those type of manufacturers could land in Oil City, a city or a region that has an industrial history and heritage, that has a talented, engaged workforce, that has technical trade schools available, and probably, I should have looked at this, I don't know what Venango County's unemployment rate is.
I think it's 4.3.
Okay, so it's better than, what's the state average, 5.1? So it's better than the state average, which is good, but my point is that you likely have available workers to fill that plant.
I'm not
Maybe
sure
not.
about that. I think
Maybe
they
not.
left.
Maybe not.
It's gone. But if
Yeah.
it came, it's sort of the chicken and the egg. If the company comes, perhaps we can get those people back.
I'm a Penn State guy. I've watched tons of our Penn State engineers come home. They were all down in Houston. They're all back here.
Yeah.
I mean, around our table is covered with
Yeah, we
Pennsylvanians.
do. We have an awful lot of young people that would do anything to come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, the Forge the Future study, there's a
that's a
study
great
that's been
point.
done, I'll send it to you.
Okay.
That kind of talks about potential here. When Dave was talking about this plant being within 700 miles of all the plastics, there's sort of the downstream opportunities that he's touching on. They've actually done, McKinsey has done a study on the potential if the cracker is built and what it means for the Pennsylvania economy. It's almost like 60 billion in GDP if we get the economic equation right. Almost
2025,
Yeah.
the estimate is by 2025, $60 billion of GDP growth in Pennsylvania with 100,000 new jobs.
Yeah.
Petrochemical clusters, power generation,
What was
small grid,
Over how many years? Next.
By
2025.
2025.
So it's short term.
And I think it's important to note, one of the things we have been talking about is the fact that even though, we're 700 miles from these facilities, they're not gonna necessarily relocate here, but they're gonna be purchasing those products. It's the downstream opportunity that we're gonna build as a result of that proximity to the location. So it's the kind of,
See, what they did is they took a look at where that plant was, and they took rings out. What they determined is that 70% of the plastic manufacturers in the US fall within 700 miles of that ring. So some of them may be already in our backyard that we don't
Yeah.
even know about.
We have a couple here. We have two
Okay.
types of.
yeah,
Okay.
Well, I think the skepticism comes from, when it started here in 2008, when those prices started going up in shale production, there was that talk about that, and it got everyone excited about it, and then it all settled down, and it went away, and they went, you're gonna build it where? So there's just a lot of skepticism, like, what's it mean to us?
I hate to use the term, I won't use it. I was gonna say the term mind mouth, but that's not fair, because I would tell you, they're building the plant where the products are being generated. It's to the west of I-79, eastern Ohio, northern West Virginia. That's primarily the liquids rich window. And if you think about, they're not trucking those products to the plant. They're gonna pipe them in. So if you have to build pipe here, let's say we put the plant here along the river in Oil City, you would be piping it 80 miles from up along the Allegheny River, or if it's from northern West Virginia, probably 150 miles. So,
Well, in the near term, you're suggesting that what we're gonna see is perhaps a little bit of effect from the cracker plant, but more from the infrastructure, getting it going.
I believe that a rising tide lifts all boats. I think what ends up happening is if plastic manufacturing takes place, let's say it's in metropolitan Pittsburgh, there are products that the supply chain in Oil City will provide to those facilities. I think that I think a rising tide in one region lifts the entire region, because I think there's ancillary job opportunities and growth potential for businesses all over the Commonwealth. We've seen it in our coalition. I mean, our supply chain membership has been fairly robust, and it's companies from here, it's companies from Erie, it's companies from Philadelphia that aren't necessarily in the center of the shale play that support what we're doing.
David, is everything leased here that can be leased?
No, not yet. I would tell you, central Pennsylvania is still very much an exploratory part of the play. Lycoming North and Allegheny South, maybe Butler Armstrong South, I would say there's a lot of leasing that has taken place. To say it's all leased would be an overstatement, because some leases expire. I mean, leases are usually 5 years in length, and if a company comes in, takes a 5-year lease and doesn't drill upon it, they have the right to, I think they usually have a right to release for 3 or 5 years beyond that, but we're 10 years into this play, if you had 10 years and haven't had any
A lot of them
activity.
have been dropped. A lot of my friends have had their leases just dropped.
And I would tell you, a lot of it's because of price. It's not because there's not gas there. No one's anxious to go in and do exploratory development when you've got, let's say I've got 2 well pads in Beaver County, and I've had high success on those pad locations, and I've only drilled 2 or 3 wells on a well pad that can hold 8 or 10 wells. Why would I go up and put exploratory capital in Crawford County or Venango County or Forest or Clarion County if I know that I have a guaranteed return on that pad location where I can go down and put 2 or 3 or 4
Right.
more wells on? That's what's taking place today, because we're in a very tight window until we get closer to NYMEX pricing in Pennsylvania, because we're not there yet. It's one of my complaints of the governor, is that we keep doing economic modeling on NYMEX pricing of gas, and we have enormous discounts. Parts of the year at 70% discount to NYMEX. Normally 30%, but as much as 70% discount to NYMEX pricing because of the lack of infrastructure. We need to modernize our pipeline systems to be able to get gas to consumption regions of Pennsylvania and consumption regions of the country.
So this region right here, now, excuse me for being parochial, but this region right here has 2 things going for it. That cracker plant, which could have ancillary effects here, and the second one being, no, your gas is still here, and when that price gets to a place, it'll come back.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I agree with
But
that.
that's a fair synopsis?
I believe that. I believe that when we see a better price of natural gas, demand rises a little bit, we're getting closer to market prices for gas, I think we'll see development in western Pennsylvania. Yes, I believe that. I mean, as evidenced by, there's a rig active in Clarion County. We haven't seen an activity really in Clarion. Clearfield had some development, Jefferson had some development, EQT, EOG, those were companies that are active there. There's not been as much on the western edge of the state, Forest, Venango, Crawford,
Well, I see the
Erie.
river separates it. I don't know whether that's an
There's
old
shale
wives'
here.
tale.
There is shale here, and there are exploratory hydrocarbon-bearing shales here that someday will be produced, I believe.
Utica, do you think? Just mark.
Potentially. I don't know if any company has come into this region and tested the Utica. Utica's expensive to test, so you're talking $10 million probably to drill into the Utica to take a look at what it's gonna look like with a horizontal lateral. So, on top of that, you're talking someone having the lease in place, building a road, having pipelines to take the gas away, building a pad location, all the permitting. There's a lot that goes into that, so.
Well, it has to get over $48 a barrel.
Yeah,
to do
understood,
that.
understood. Guys, I want you to know, I really appreciate taking time. If,
Oh, glad
as
you
you
came.
write your story, if there's something that doesn't make sense, you didn't ask me, don't hesitate to call me. I try to be fairly open and candid during my conversations. You notice I didn't go to my notes or anything. I just try and give you what I think I know about this business. I'm not an expert on the conventional side of our business, and I probably show that. I know that's a concern for folks in this region. There are companies that are investing on the conventional side, but I will tell you
But
that
mostly to put them together to go deep.
potentially,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's their business model or not, or if their business model is to be able to group their production to be able to get into the pipeline, interstate pipeline systems that are pretty taxed right now. The pipeline
we-
systems are taxed.
We had our run.
It's
Our-
not
our
over.
stripper wells.
It's not over. I would tell you, I don't believe, and I have answered your last question, I don't believe it's over. I think that there will be development in this region again someday when prices improve and the opportunity presents itself.
In your estimation, how long do you
Aye,
think the process
that's-
will take?
That would be a crystal ball that I don't have. I'd love to say it's tomorrow, but it's not.
I guess getting back to Judy's point about a lot of people, I mean, just an example, I mean, Oil City itself is down to like 10,500 population.
Yeah.
By the time the cracker plant gets up and running, the population is gonna keep decreasing, which would not bode well for the attraction of downstream businesses here as opposed to somewhere closer down to the plant
Understood,
itself.
Well,
understood.
one of the things that hasn't happened too, though, is that, you can't sit here and wait for the Shell company to come to us.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
People from
yeah.
here have to go down and say, hey, you know what, we're thinking
We
of
can
doing
do this for you, we can do this for you.
Yeah,
I will
that's
tell
right.
you, if folks are looking at the Shell cracker plant as the revitalization of Oil City someday, I think that might be an overstatement.
Sure.
Is there business opportunity and some job generation that is likely to flow from that? I believe, yes, I do. Okay,
One of the best stories about conventional oil, I'm not gonna, when it was $8 a barrel and it was just awful up here, went out with a fellow and some rigs over here, and he was walking along and he took a big swipe of Pengrade and stuck it on his arm. I said, what are you doing? He said, it cures shingles.
really?
I said, you're kidding. He said, no. He said, why don't you know that? He said, anybody in my age who's ever had shingles goes out to a stripper well, throws it on their arm or their leg and it's gone.
Wow,
Just, so
wow.
there is a reason why we're here.
I'll be back. If I get shingles, I'll be back to
That's
visit.
right.